Okay, so have you ever found yourself in charge of something maybe like a project at work or planning a group trip or, I don't know, even just trying to pick what to watch on movie night?
Oh, yeah, all the time.
And you realize pretty fast you just cannot please everyone. It's like impossible, right?
Totally. Someone always has a different idea.
Exactly. Now imagine that feeling, but kind of amplified,
Yeah.
in a world where every single thing you do, every choice, gets praised by some people and just hammered by others. We see it all the time, especially online.
And, this isn't just a modern thing. It was actually a huge, huge challenge for this ancient community in the Bible, the church in Corinth.
Oh, right, Corinth.
Yeah. And their division wasn't over, like, politics or the stuff we often argue about today. It was about who they followed as leaders. Some were Team Paul, others Team Apollos, some Peter. Some even said, no, we only follow Jesus.
Wow. So internal squabbles over leaders. That sounds, well, surprisingly familiar.
It really does. And that prompted the Apostle Paul to write them this pretty significant letter.
Which is exactly where we're heading today. We're doing a deep dive, looking at Pastor Florin's recent sermon from Agape Community Church. He really dug into 1 Corinthians chapter 4.
Yeah, he unpacked how Paul handled this exact division.
Right. But it's not just, ancient history. This dive is really about what it means for us today to find genuine unity. And, maybe surprisingly, how becoming an apprentice can actually help us find rest in this really restless world we live in.
So the big question we're kind of wrestling with, I guess, is what does it really look like to follow someone or even to lead in a way that builds authentic unity, especially when it feels like everything culturally, socially is just pulling us in opposite directions? How do we even do that?
That feels so relevant. Pastor Florin made this point right at the start of his sermon, and it stuck with me. He said leadership, whether it's big or small scale, is not for the faint of heart.
That's true.
Leaders often end up being, like he said, heroes to some and villains to others, simultaneously. And you see that everywhere in our society, don't you? Politicians, community leaders, even just people with a platform online.
Yeah, every action gets spun both ways, praised and condemned. It's definitely a universal thing.
And that was happening in Corinth, too.
Absolutely. That church was fragmented, just like Pastor Florin described, different groups backing different apostles, which led to, well, a lot of internal friction, a lot of bickering.
Okay.
And Paul saw how critical this was, so he addresses it directly in 1 Corinthians 4. He's trying to steer them back towards, real unity.
So Paul's approach to leadership, it was different, wasn't it? Not the typical follow me because I'm the best kind of thing. What was his angle?
Well, he wanted leaders, including himself, to be seen primarily as servants of Christ and also as people entrusted with the mysteries God has revealed.
Servants and stewards, almost.
Exactly. It shifts the focus completely from power or status to like service and responsibility. And the main thing he said God requires, just one word, faithfulness.
Faithfulness. That was the benchmark.
Yeah, that was the core requirement. Yeah.
But then he says something really counterintuitive. My conscience is clear, but that doesn't make me innocent. That's a bit of a head scratcher, right? Especially today when we're often told, just trust your gut.
Right. It totally pushes back against that modern idea that our feelings are the ultimate judge. Paul's saying essentially, look, just because I feel okay about something doesn't automatically mean I'm right in God's eyes.
So our internal compass isn't foolproof.
Not at all. He makes it super clear that the Lord is the final judge. He says, therefore judge nothing before the appointed time. Wait until the Lord comes, because he's the one who will bring to light what is hidden in the darkness and will expose the motives of the heart.
Wow.
Yeah. It's a pretty strong reminder that we don't see the whole picture. Our gut feelings can be wrong.
So connecting that to now, thinking especially about, say, young people navigating the world today, the constant scrutiny on social media, the instant judgments, the comment sections. How does this idea from Paul, judge nothing before the appointed time, how does that actually help? It almost feels like permission to breathe, to not get crushed by all that evaluation.
It absolutely does. It offers like genuine freedom in a way. Think about it. In a world obsessed with instant takes and constant judgment, this perspective says, hold on, you don't have to carry the weight of everyone else's opinion or even your own harsh self-judgment.
Yeah.
There's a bigger, ultimate evaluation that matters more. It allows you to step back from the noise, Whether that noise is external criticism or just that internal pressure we put on ourselves. It lets you rest in the fact that the final verdict isn't in yet, and it's not up to us or anyone else online.
And Paul didn't just, like give instructions, did he? He used himself and Apollos as examples.
Exactly. He explicitly says he applied these principles to himself and Apollos for their benefit. Why? So they could learn not to go beyond what we wrote to you earlier. Basically, learn from our example to avoid getting arrogant or, as he puts it, puffed up.
They were living it out.
They were trying to, yeah. And that's where this kind of paradox comes in, this idea of true strength. Paul points out, almost sarcastically, how the Corinthians saw themselves. They felt they were already rich, they'd begun to reign, they were so wise, so strong, honored.
Right. They felt like they had arrived.
Yeah,
Successful by worldly standards.
totally. But then Paul flips it and describes his own reality and the reality of the other apostles, and it's just stark.
Yeah, what does he say? It's pretty intense.
He says they were put on display at the end of the procession like those condemned to die in the arena, like a public spectacle.
Oh.
Yeah. A spectacle to the whole universe. He says, "We are fools for Christ, but you are so wise. We are weak, but you are strong. You are honored, we are dishonored." And then he lists the specifics. Hungry, thirsty, in rags, brutally treated, homeless, even working hard with our hands to support themselves.
That is not the Instagram version of leadership, is it? Not what most people aspire to.
Not even close. And yet, look at the response. This is the kicker. When we are cursed, we bless. When we are persecuted, we endure it. When we are slandered, we answer kindly.
Okay, so that raises the question Pastor Florin asked. What kind of strength is that? This is obviously not about dominance or looking good. It's something else entirely.
Exactly. It's a completely different kind of power, a countercultural strength.
And Pastor Florin pulled out, what, 7 qualities from Paul's example, qualities that define this new kind of human being, as he called it. And importantly, not just for people in official leader roles, right, but for anyone trying to live differently, seeking that real unity.
That's right. These are for everyone. So the first one was authentic. Paul's life matched his message. His video matched his audio, as Pastor Florin put it. No hypocrisy.
Okay, makes sense.
Second, servant-hearted, just accepting Jesus' authority in everything, even suffering like those slaves condemned to die, but without bitterness. That's key.
Right, not resentful about the hardship.
Third, transparent, living life out in the open as a spectacle. Nothing hidden. It speaks to real integrity, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. What's fourth?
Fourth, countercultural. Being willing to look foolish or weak by the world's standards, because spiritual wisdom, it often uses different tools, different metrics than worldly success.
Okay, different playbook.
Fifth, sacrificial. Enduring hardship, hunger, thirst, rags not for personal gain, but for what Pastor Florin termed kingdom advancement.
Kingdom advancement. Can you unpack that a bit? Sometimes that phrase feels a bit churchy.
Sure. It connects back to what Jesus taught. When we follow Jesus, we're essentially adopted into God's family, which the Bible also calls the nation of God or the kingdom of God. It's like this real community, this nation with its own culture and values.
Okay, a different kind of belonging.
Exactly. And Jesus specifically said, remember in Matthew 6.33, seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, because everything else, what we think, do, say, kind of flows from that priority. So Paul's sacrifice wasn't just random suffering. It was for the sake of building that kingdom, that community.
Got it. That helps. So that was 5. What's 6?
Sixth, diligent. Remember Paul working hard with our hands. Ministry, or just living out this faith, isn't always glamorous. It's often just hard, consistent work. Pastor Florin shared that statistic, didn't he? About 90% of people starting in ministry moving on. It takes real grit.
Wow, 90%. Yeah, that takes diligence.
Okay,
and the last one.
Seventh, and this kind of sums it all up, becoming a new kind of human being. This is the transformation. Because left to our own devices, human nature usually doesn't keep blessing when cursed, or enduring persecution, or answering kindly when slandered. Eventually, we give up or lash out. These 7 qualities together point to a fundamentally different way of being human.
Which brings us back to that idea of surrender. It feels like such a paradox. You know, in the world, surrender often sounds like giving up, like despair, conflict, defeat.
Right. It has negative connotations.
But Paul's message, and what Pastor Florin highlighted, points to a different kind of surrender, surrendering to God. And somehow that surrender leads to hope, not despair. It leads to unity, not conflict, and ultimately to life, not self-destruction.
It's a total reframing. And it's actually an invitation. Jesus himself gives this amazing invitation in Matthew 11. He says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest."
Yeah, that's such a well-known passage.
It is. And then he says, "Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Now, that word yoke, Pastor Florin explained, it's basically a metaphor for apprenticeship.
Oh, okay. Like learning a trade from a master.
Exactly. Jesus is saying, become my apprentice, learn my way of living, walk alongside me, and you'll actually find rest. You'll find freedom. And think about how practical that is for anyone today feeling totally weary and overloaded by all the pressure. It's an offer of a lighter way.
Okay, so if someone's listening and thinking, yes, I feel weary, I want that rest, I want to live differently, how do we actually do that? What were the practical steps Pastor Florin gave for becoming an apprentice?
He laid out 3 really clear steps. First one is foundational. Become an apprentice of Jesus. That's the starting point.
Just decide.
Well, it starts with intention, because that unity we want with others, it really begins with getting right with God, seeking unity with Him. Pastor Florin suggested just starting with a simple, heartfelt prayer, something like, Jesus, I want to follow you. I want to be your apprentice.
No fancy words needed.
No, from the heart. And it's not necessarily a one-and-done thing either. It could be a first-time prayer, or it could be something you recommit to daily. This is how we actually start to embody that different kind of humanity, the kind that can bless when cursed, even, in the chaos of online arguments or whatever.
Okay, so that's step 1. What's next?
Step 2 is to make time for transformation. You have to actually, learn the new lifestyle.
Right, it doesn't just happen automatically.
Exactly. Like learning any new skill or hobby, following Jesus takes intentional learning and practice. And Pastor Florin broke it down into 3 parts.
Okay.
Your heart, that's about perseverance, drawing strength daily from God's Spirit, your mind. Gaining perspective, understanding, especially through things like reading the Bible. And your body. This is the practice part, how we actually behave, how we speak, how we interact with people. It's about putting what we learn into action. That practical component is essential to apprenticeship. It's learning by doing.
Heart, mind, body.
Yeah.
Okay, and the 3rd step?
The 3rd step applies to everyone, leadership role or not. It's be faithful, stay humble, and let Jesus evaluate your effectiveness. How? By actively practicing those 7 qualities we talked about: authentic, servant, transparent, countercultural, sacrificial, diligent, renewed.
So living them out intentionally.
Yes,
Yeah.
and Pastor Florin had that great practical exercise suggestion. Every day, maybe just write down 1 sentence for each quality. To be authentic today, I will. Or to be sacrificial today means something simple to make it concrete. It helps you be faithful, stay humble, and just keep going.
That's really practical, just focusing on those daily actions.
Yeah.
Okay, so wrapping this up, what's the big takeaway? What should we be mulling over this week?
I think it comes back to that core idea. In a world that's honestly desperate for unity, maybe the most important deep dive is the one into ourselves, asking, how can I personally start to embody more of that new kind of human being? How can I practice blessing when cursed, enduring when persecuted, answering kindly when slandered?
Yeah. What does that intentional, apprentice-driven life actually look like for you right now, this
Good.
week? That's definitely something to think about.
For sure. And hey, if this deep dive resonated with you, if it was helpful, please consider subscribing and maybe share it with a friend who might find it useful too.
Absolutely. And also, we mentioned prayer. If you have anything you'd like prayer for, you can submit requests confidentially online at agapechurch.life. We have a prayer team that would be honored to pray specifically for you.
Definitely take advantage of that. And finally, if you're curious about more content, we do have a YouTube channel.
We do. It's, let's be honest, still a work in progress, but we're adding stuff and getting better. So check that out too.
Yeah, check it out. Thanks for diving deep with us today.
Thanks, everyone.